I'm about to have a heart attack. My heart was pounding out of my chest. I'm like, if I don't get this stuff in the next like 5 or 6 days, I'm gonna lose like $500,000 that I don't have, and my company's bankrupt. We literally were like, we'll never get out of this. I called my wife and I said, you need to come home right now. I can't feel my legs at the hospital. He gave me 2 options. He goes, either you have emergency back surgery, like right now, we're rushing you to surgery, or you're never going to walk again in your life.
You go from crippled and bankrupt to 2 years later, you have a $4 million exit.
Yep. I was sitting there still pretty depressed, and I was watching YouTube one night. Some crazy guy named Moran is doing some speak about how you can go from 0 to $1 million in 12 months.
All you need to focus on is getting to this level.
Sounds like a scam.
And I'm like, this guy is so full of shit. So
From bankrupt, crippled, and depressed to a successful multi-millionaire entrepreneur in less than 2 years. This is the story of Jared Springer. Within 2 years of finding my work, he had a multi-million-dollar business that he sold for a cool $4 million. In this interview, we are going to talk about what product he sold, how he took it to market, how he sourced the product, how he got to the first million. But more importantly, you're going to hear all of the obstacles that Jared had to overcome in order to get to that level. And if Jared can overcome what he faced, then you are left with no excuses. At the end of this interview, I also asked Jared what life looks like after an exit. Going from broke and crippled to a multi-millionaire in a very short period of time, that's a big life change. And so we go through what life looks like and how things change after you've had a big success. But my favorite part of all of this is that Jared is now one of our coaches inside of our community, and he only does it because he cares so much about investing in and mentoring the next crop of success stories. So if you're watching this and you're thinking, I'm too late, Jared got started at the right time, I want you to know that half the people that come on this show who are success stories just come on because they care about the next crop of success stories. They started where you are, watching the YouTube videos, listening to the podcast, reading the book, and they've all had success. And now they all have an interest in seeing you be in the next crop of success stories. All right, let's dive in with Jared.
So Jared, the way that I often like to start these is just to ask, how did you make your money?
how did I make my money? Well, I actually made my money because of you.
Because I fed you that one.
You did feed? No, you didn't. So I started an e-commerce brand. Do you want me to go into the backstory first, or kind of just jump in?
Tell me the end result first, and then I want to hear about the climb getting there.
Okay, so it was about a 3 to 4 year climb. I went from bankrupt and crippled, and I was bankrupt because my son was actually born with like club feet, flipped upside down.
And would you explain what that is? Because you told me last night.
Yeah.
And I've heard the term clubbed feet, but WTF, I did not know it was that.
So it's a genetic condition. It runs in certain people's families, and it's basically like instead of your feet, like this, it's like this.
Like on the wrong way on your foot.
Yeah, so basically like when you look down, you see the tops of your feet. He saw the bottoms of his feet, and they flipped upside down. We knew it was happening because, when they did the 20-week ultrasound to, find out the sex of your baby or what it's going to be, they did it, and then they're like, you need to wait here. We have to go get a specialist. And
oh,
we're
no.
like, oh my God, what do you mean? What's wrong with our son? They're like, oh, he'll be okay. And we're like, that's still not, you're still freaking me the frick out. Like, I was like, okay. And then they told us like, hey, they showed us the picture, and we're like, oh crap. So it involved basically 5 years of surgeries. His first year of his life, surgery. And then every year they put his feet in, or every single week, I should say, they put his feet in casts. And then at the end of the week, we go to the children's hospital. They cut the cast off with the grinder thing, bend his feet out a little bit, recast him in. And we did that for a year. And the medical bills of that just added up. So we were like $500,000 in debt. So we ended up filing bankruptcy. We had nothing we literally were like, we'll never get out of this. My wife and I didn't make much money at the time. I did like sales. My wife was working at the time. She was working at that hospital, UW Hospital in Madison, Wisconsin. Luckily, like I told you last night, the specialist that trains every doctor, I believe his name was like Dr. Noonan, I can't remember his name exactly, was based out of the hospital she worked in. So we had the guy who trains every other surgeon in the country taking care of our son. So that's kind of how we got in so much debt. Not any of our accord. Like we were always like super conservative.
But every single parent would choose $500,000 in debt to give their kid a healthy, normal life.
Absolutely.
But you told me that he was like screaming in terrible pain for years.
So the surgeries were the worst, like, and just seeing him in so much pain when he would come out of surgery. The one, and I've never shared this like publicly or talked about it, for one of the surgeries when they cut his heel cord, they actually put a pole about this long, like a metal pole. Think of this as your foot from the toe all the way to the ankle, like an entire steel rod through his toe, through his whole foot to the other. And then it had to set after the surgery. Oh, God. And I had to sit there and hold him down. And then I damn near passed out because he was screaming so bad when they pulled it out, and getting a little emotional, but I almost lost it. And I was like, so me and my wife were planning on having more kids. We have two boys, two healthy boys. He runs around, plays, rides a dirt bike, rides a bicycle. Like he does everything a normal kid should do. Like I told you last night when you found out about this, you're like, oh my God. And I was like, I'm thankful because I have a different perspective on life than a lot of people. We could have lived in a country where we didn't have medical care, or we could have been someplace that didn't have good doctors that know how to handle it. My wife literally worked at the hospital where the #1 surgeon / caretaker of the whole country, who teaches people all over the world on this, was there. And so we had the best care in the world for my son. So now people wouldn't know unless you look at his foot and it's nothing but scars front and back on both of his feet. You wouldn't know. His feet are turned in still just a tiny little bit. But I mean, he runs and blitzes and, does everything a normal kid should do. He's 10 years old. So I'm thankful that we were in the position and the place and everything aligned that he came out of it and he can run and be a normal kid. So that was the most important thing.
Obviously, you're thankful for that. But at the time, it puts you $500,000 in debt and you go bankrupt. Mm-hmm. And if I remember correctly, at around the same time, you were in an accident.
Yeah. So it wasn't really an accident. So it was actually more of a mental struggle. This was like I had started years before this happened, kind of on like an entrepreneurial journey. I had a real estate license. I was trying to do all these things, but I had this like internal battle of do I quit my job? Do I not quit my job? So I never went all in on being an entrepreneur because I was a father. I had 2 babies at home. Like I wouldn't allow myself to quit my job. And so I had this mental battle over and over and over. And every time I wouldn't listen, my back pain would get worse, and my back pain would get worse. And I spent a year going to physical therapists and chiropractors and all these different things. None of it worked. And I'm like, just give me surgery, fix the damn problem. I was miserable. I couldn't stand, I couldn't sit, I couldn't do anything. And this was just after I had filed bankruptcy. So like a year later, now I'm racking up more medical debt. Oh, goodness. Couldn't work. So I was out of the work. My wife supported us. And I had, a lot of people don't know this, I had an appointment with the surgeon on a Friday, and this happened on a Thursday. I woke up one morning, I couldn't feel either one of my legs. They were completely gone. No feeling whatsoever in my legs. I hopped out of bed because my son, who is Isaac, was in his crib screaming because something was bothering him. He wanted out of his, babies, they need attention. I literally dragged my body on my forearms because my legs did not work. I somehow propped myself up. My other son is 14 months older, so he was around, I think, 1.5, 2. I called my wife and I said, you need to come home right now. I can't feel my legs at the hospital. I pulled my son out of this crib and I blacked out from the pain and passed out. And the only thing I remember is my wife rushing in. And my wife's tiny. She's like 5'2", 110 pounds, tiny little person. And I can't tell on camera, I'm 6'4", 220. And at that time, I was 6'4" and like 250. She somehow carried me out into our Jeep and rushed me to the emergency room. And they rushed me into the thing. It filled me full of drugs finally. They were like, we need to do an MRI. And then the surgeon who I had an appointment with the next day comes in and he gave me 2 options. He goes, either you have emergency back surgery, like right now, we're rushing you to surgery, or you're never going to walk again in your life. because my legs were, and I was 29 years old. So not like an old person. This was like 9 years ago. I'm 38 now. So like, I couldn't feel my legs. They were like, I was like, I always joke about it. Like, oh, have emergency back surgery, never walk again. Hard choice, ha 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 ha. And I'm like, yeah, shit me into surgery. And so I went into surgery.
How long since your son's final operation was this? Like, what was the gap between these two traumatic events?
Probably like 6 months to a year.
Jeez.
So pretty damn close.
So your son's having surgery, you're bankrupt, you're exhausted, and your back is hurting. Probably from a lot of stress, internal pressure, guilt, shame, and then you have to have emergency surgery. So this is all in a period of like 12 to 18 months.
Yeah.
That's a bad year.
I think the universe sometimes, I always tell people it's the best thing that ever happened to me in retrospect.
God, I hate when people say that.
Because
it's like, how I am not that strong. Like when people like you say that, I'm like, I don't know that I want the best thing to happen. If that's the best thing to happen, I want out.
Well, I have this this philosophy that nothing's really good nor bad.
It
just, anything can be really good or bad. And most people, I think, get down because they think bad things are happening to them. Like, I could have not done anything, and that could have been a bad thing for me. Like, all the stuff I went through, but that pushed me to make a change. So it was the one thing that finally was like, hey, dumbass, across the head, like, you're going to change whether you like it or not. I'm taking away your ability to walk for a year after the surgery. So I'm like 29, 30 years old. I'm walking around in a walker. I can't wipe my own ass. My wife is having to help me with everything. And so I think things happen to show you a way, and it's not necessarily bad or good. We perceive things in a way that our mental construct kind of changes them to, but I don't think everything really is good or bad. I think it's just some things are bad scenarios, but they lead you to better scenarios down the road versus if you make no change, you just take everything as a bad scenario.
I once heard some YouTube clip of like a brain surgeon or brain scientist or neuroscientist, whatever they're called, talking about the fact that people, when they're adults, don't really change unless they experience financial, relationship, or health trauma. And it takes that amount of pain to finally say, all right, I will change. I will do something. And it sounds like you went through at least two of those three, and it got your attention.
Absolutely.
So you obviously recovered from surgery. You're in great shape. You walked in here. So like, happy ending there.
Yeah.
But how long was your recovery? And I want to know, okay, you want to change, but you're still crippled. You're still recently bankrupt. How do you change when you can barely walk or pay your bills?
Yeah, so I'm not going to lie. I went through a really dark, depressed, probably 6 months to a year. At the time, I was recovering. I wanted to go back to work, but I couldn't. And so I was like, I felt worthless, I know it shouldn't matter like who makes money or whatever, but I felt like I couldn't help provide for my kids. I couldn't provide for my family. I couldn't walk. I couldn't do anything. My wife was having to mow the grass. And I was like, I love mowing the grass. Now I have gardeners, but back then I loved mowing the grass. And so it was a really dark period. Very depressed. And the one thing that kind of saved it is I started going back to some of the original teachings that I had learned kind of on my run up to get my real estate license and things like that, and like my self-improvement, my reading every day, my journaling. And then I was sitting there still pretty depressed, and I was watching YouTube one night, and this is like a video you posted like 8 years ago. Some crazy guy named Daniel Moran is doing some speak about how you can go from 0 to $1 million in 12 months.
Sounds like a scam.
And I was like,
what
totally.
A prick. What a prick says 0 to $1 million in 12 months. This guy sounds like a goofy prick.
And I'm like, this guy is so full of shit. So no offense, but it's the internet. And so I started looking, actually, I started doing a little digging into actually. And I had taken some courses. We had some like people that I had followed that knew you. And so I was like, all right, I'll give this guy a chance. I was like, okay.
I'll give his free content a chance.
And actually, joking all aside, I actually didn't think you were like, something about your speech just like, it super inspired me. Like I had done all this self-improvement to learn how to like fundamentally change my brain and how I thought. Cause I came from, super poor upbringings, no money, no food in the house, broken family, all the things, that everybody most US faces nowadays. So like I had this horrible mental programming. So I had kind of fixed that, but I never had anybody who was like, this is how you make $1 million. Like I always tell people I was like before this, I was like a course collector and I would read books nonstop. And 10 years I was an entrepreneur.
An info junkie.
Junkie.
Yeah, you're just looking for the idea. Like you're feeding your brain, but you don't have a path.
Yeah, there's no like clear like point A to point B. It was always like, okay, so I just would constantly like try to learn things, try to read books, try to do this. And something about you is like, this is what you do. It's the same speech you do now. Actually, I think it's like the 4 products, 25 sales a day, $1 million. I'm like, that is so stupid simple. It might actually work. I was like, I'm like, okay, he's not doing all the fancy like salesy jargon, all this stuff. It was like simple path, create a product, serve an audience, create a product to serve those audience, sell them the stuff, launch another product that serves them, build a brand, make money. I was like, wow, like this is stupid simple. The problem is I didn't have any money to like hire you, buy anything. Like, so I was really in like a dark hole, but mentally I was like, okay, I got to figure this out one way or another. I got to figure out how to do this. And so like I went online and I started searching e-commerce, and then I started doing this, and then I found this thing called retail arbitrage. And I was like, I need to make money. I need to make money fast. How do I do it? What do I know? Well, like I told you, I was like an information collector for 10 years. I knew books, all books, anything books. I was a reader. So I was like, screw this. I'm in a walker with a little basket on the front, going to Goodwill, any of those Savers places, buying books for 25 cents to $1.
No way.
And I was like, what?
Like any books or self-improvement books?
Pretty much any book. And if I think they had the Seller app at that point, like way back in the day, where you could like scan a barcode, or no, it was like Profit Band. I think it was before this.
They've had some of those where you can like scan something and see what it's selling for on eBay and Amazon if you're at a retail store.
Yeah. So I wouldn't, I'd go and I'd spend hours hobbling around in my little walker. Like, and all I had was like $20 at the time to my name. Like that wasn't like to food or like paying our bills or anything else. And I went around and I would go and then I'd take them and I'd ship them to Amazon. I would make sure they were like fast sellers so I could flip them quick.
Yeah.
I'd take that money, go buy more. Then I realized like, oh, I can do the same thing with like Target with clearance aisles and like this thing with this. And I was like,
so can you think of a book that sold really well that had good margins? That would be super interesting.
I think it was like back then it was like Harry Potter. Like some of those would wind up in like, Goodwill.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, those are hot right now. So like if I buy it for 50 cents at Goodwill, $20 minus fees, I can profit like $15. I mean, $2 to $15 is a huge return on investment. Like if you're thinking numbers wise. So I just kept doing this and I did this for a few months. And then I started to make enough money and I bought your brand builder boot camp.
You bought that?
I did back in the day.
Oh my goodness.
And that's how I got kind of indoctrinated with what you did.
I actually didn't know that part.
Didn't you?
I didn't know that you were an early. I mean, that was
like one of your early
adopters. One of those early products that.
Which I think back then, I paid like $3,000 for it. And it was just like an info course. Like there was not like with the 1% now you have like coaches and help and like that. It was pretty much I think just like here's an info course.
That's right.
And it's $3,000.
Yeah.
But it had all the exact information that I needed to figure out like how to build a business, how to build a brand. And I was kind of struggling, like, what do I do? Like, I don't know what to make. I don't know what to do. And so I had a dog. I still have a dog, same dog. Name's Lucy. She's a 90-pound chocolate lab. She's 13 years old now, old and gray. But back then she was like 4 years old. She was, a little puppy. She was just like chilling. So I was like, I love dogs. So I'm like, I'm going to, start a dog brand. And so I actually like those little silicone collapsible bowls. I invented those because I'm like, this is going to set the world on fire. I was too stupid to know that I should patent it or I should do any of the back end things. And once I started selling it, I realized like this $5 product that only cost me 50 cents to make, but then had like $4.50 in, fees for fulfillment. I was making like $1 per one. I'm like, I'm going to have to sell 1 million of these damn things to make some money.
Yeah, that's why the formula is $30 price point.
So ended up going into higher price products and serving like dog owners. And I came up with the idea of these like little robotic dog banks, and they like chomp down on the coin and they put it in there, and they were like $30. And so
like a toy. Basically.
It was basically like a little dog bank, and there's like a little dog statue on top. And you put a coin in it, and it would like go nom 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 nom, and it would fall into it. But they were like $30 and like $2 to produce, so it had really good margins. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna go all in on this product. Like I don't have the money for it, so like I literally was like drop shipping some of them to start before I could afford like to manufacture them with my own brand on them. And I basically just marketed with money that I didn't have, with product that I didn't have a lot of the time, like pre-sales, to try to build this up. And then, I made, I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but I think it was like, I made like $300,000 in a matter of a few months leading up to Christmas. And I was like, holy shit, this stuff works. I have money. Like, okay. And so then I actually went back and started building a real brand.
Well, hold on. I think there's, cause you're one of the case studies in my book, 12 Months to 1 Million. And in that case study, you talk about how you had all these orders, but you almost couldn't fill them.
Yeah.
So you had made $300,000 on paper, but then there was a moment in which you almost lost it all, like this.
Yeah. So I think it was actually, I had about $500,000 in inventory coming in. It was like I put all my money on the chips on the line, ordered all this inventory. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna finally make all this money. I did skip over. That was kind of a really funny story, actually. So there's a lot of pieces that involve with it. I'm gonna order all this inventory. Like I almost crap my pants sending all this money over there. I get it. It's like a few weeks before Christmas. The stuff gets stuck in customs, and it's sitting in customs. And I have like $300,000 plus in orders. Like all this money tied up, like I have to fulfill these orders. It's sitting in customs. A lot of people bought these because they were a toy for like Christmas presents. I'm like, I called the person in customs. I think it was like in St. Louis. I paid like $26,000 to have this stuff air freighted because I'm like, I got to get in time for Christmas or it's not going to work. So I spent all this extra money to get it air freighted, and it sits for 2 weeks. And I'm just sitting there going, like pissed. Like that's a lot of money. And, I ended up getting on the phone with the person at like FedEx, and they blew me off.
And this is like 6 months. Like, I mean, were you walking normally by this point?
Yeah, I was. This was like probably like after the back surgery. I went through a dark period for like 6 months to a year. So I was almost recovered, like enough so I still was dealing with a lot of pain, but I could move around. I wasn't in a walker.
So you're just getting your head above water, right? And now it's like somebody's threatening you with a baseball bat right when your head pops up from the water, and you're about to get clubbed in the head and go back underwater.
I was like a little baby seal, like, no.
You're like just catching your breath, and then stuff gets stuck in customs right before Christmas. They blow you off. Then what happens?
So I called them, and I finally I kept calling, and I finally got to like somebody who like, they were like, we don't know why it's being held, but we'll do what we can. And I just got super sincere. Like I didn't like scream. I was like, I have so much money on the line. I'm about to have a heart attack. Like I was literally like, my heart was pounding out of my chest. I'm like, if I don't get this stuff in the next like 5 or 6 days, I'm going to lose like $500,000 that I don't have, and my company's bankrupt. And I'm like, and I just filed bankruptcy like a couple of years prior. So I can't even file bankruptcy again.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, and she finally was like, okay, I don't know. Like I believe in like, whatever you believe, the God, universe, whatever it is. Somebody was like,
Tom Cruise. Yeah. Oprah.
Tom Cruise is up there. You're Oprah. You get a car. You get your order. You get your material for Christmas. You've been a good boy.
Thank you, Oprah.
And so she's like, I will make sure that it's released today. And I was like,
wow.
And this was, I'm trying to remember the dates. I mean, this is a long time ago now. But it was like a week before Christmas. And in order to get stuff shipped out, you need at least 4 or 5 days to ship it. So it was like a week and a half maybe before Christmas, and it was going to take like 2 or 3 days to get to me. So I literally had it had to come, be boxed, and then shipped out like immediately. And so then I had another problem because I'm like, up until this point, we had small enough orders that I was fulfilling it from the house, and I didn't have a big house. I had a little like 1,200 square foot split level house in Wisconsin. It's December. It's cold. I was like, okay, what do I do? And this is a big lesson of like how you treat people, relationships, business is prior to starting my own business and all the other stuff. I was a manager in retail chains. I managed at Walmart. I managed at Target. So I had this whole family that I loved that I managed all at Target. They were from Albania. We called them the Albanians. They're this crazy Albanian family. They all move here, make a ton of money. They have a really good life here. And so I called one of them up and I was like, hey, I need a team of people. I know you guys, you work Target, you stock trucks, whatever. And I'm like, I know some of you may have to work. They're like, Jared, for you, we'll call into work. I was paying them cash too, a lot of money cash. They're like, for you, we'll call into work. And I was like, okay. So I got this team of like 16 Albanians. And we took one of them because a lot of these were the wives and they had kids. And so there was all these kids running around. And I had like.
So we're dangerously close to promoting child labor laws on this podcast right now.
And a lot of them didn't, fully speak English. So there was some communication barriers and we're trying to.
There's going to be no YouTube comments about capitalism and exploitation right now. None at all.
Hey,
Anyway, so you pay them cash to come over. Them and their children are now in your garage.
Just played with my kids and all the other stuff. We had one person.
Good safe. Yeah.
They're amazing people. Like, I still, just so you know, every time I go back to Wisconsin, a lot of them still work there, and I run into them when I go to Target, and they're always like, Jared, you need anything? We'll come work for you again. They're just great people, and the real reason they did it, joking aside, is because I just treat everyone like a human, because everyone is a good person.
I mean, when you've seen the darkest of the dark, you develop empathy real fast. Like, you realize everyone's gone through shit.
Exactly.
Right? And everyone experiences events differently, and the people who are grumpy for a reason. Like you develop empathy real quick when you've been through shit. So they're helping you fill all these orders, and you've got to make them in like the next 5 days and get them shipped out or to Amazon or to what?
We shipped out. So it was, we didn't have time to put it to like a fulfillment warehouse or anything else. So literally it was December 16th. I remember the day because it was like, we have to have this shipped so that way it has time to get there before Christmas. It has to go out December 16th. I believe the number was I had 7,000 orders to fulfill in one day. And so in a day. So I literally had the morning at 9 a.m. I had this whole Albanian workforce show up, and there's just like tables set out in my garage. Like before this, I like ordered pallets of boxes from like Uline and tape. Like I had everything printed, all the shipping labels printed, organized by like size, color, so we could assembly line it because we're Wisconsin in a cold garage in the middle of winter. FedEx truck shows up at 9 a.m. They back up the trailer, drop like a full FedEx trailer full of pallets in my gravel driveway, and we just go to work. I borrowed a pallet jack, and we'd roll one pallet into the garage or two pallets into the garage, and we'd go to work. And the shitty part was I had scheduled a postal service, like 53 foot, me and the postal service, like send an entire truck. I'm going to fill it. We'll pack it, ship, like shrink wrap the pallets. We'll load them for you, get them on the truck. And then you just need to get them to the warehouse or the distribution center. And then they'll do it from there. So like, okay, we'll send you a whole trailer. So all the Albanians get there. The truck drops off stuff. We go to work. It's December 16th in Wisconsin. It's middle winter time. It starts snowing, and snowing horribly bad. And so all of these people are like sitting there, and I get a call from the postmaster. It's like, hey, Jared, I know we have that trailer coming out to you that was supposed to, have it filled all day, and then we were going to pick it up at like 5. We need it to leave by like noon. And at this point, I think we had packed like one pallet worth of boxes. I was like, no, we can't do that. They're like, sorry, the truck's already on its way. And so the truck driver gets there, backs up, and I'm like, sorry, dude, you're just going to have to sit and wait. And he was like, excuse me? I'm like, you're going to have to wait. And at that point, I actually did I was like, so are we going to have a problem here? And I got all but I did actually was very friendly to him. I'm like, hey, I kind of explained the situation. He's like, okay, what do you need me to do? And the postal truck driver started wrapping pallets for me. Wow. He was like teamwork, everyone was working together. We literally, and prior to that, I was up for 3 days straight printing out shipping labels. I had stacks of boxes everywhere, already assembled, the bottom, they just needed to be packed. So I had been up for 3 or 4 days at this point. And so I was finally got the truck loaded. He left at 4 o'clock. We just assembly lined order after order after order. It was like a well-oiled machine. I was so blown away, when we got done and the truck was on its way, that I literally just collapsed in a chair and fell asleep.
So short story, the orders got out.
The orders got out.
You saved the $500,000.
Yep.
And was that the foundation of the business that ended up becoming a 7-figure business?
Yeah, it was.
Selling dog banks.
Dog banks. We specialized in selling things we didn't want to get into the market was very competitive for dog toys or things like that. One of the things we realized is that dog owners love dogs, but they love themselves almost more than they love their dogs. So if they can buy something dog themed, but they use it, they're even more apt to buy it because they love dogs. So we ended up selling wallets and dog banks, and we just developed a whole suite of
dog paraphernalia.
Dog paraphernalia, basically, for dog lovers.
Yeah, you don't think of that as a hot niche, but what you did was you had a person in mind, and you came up with products that they would buy, even though they weren't logical on first thought. They need this dog bank. You're just serving the owner. You're serving the pet owner. Are you comfortable saying what you sold it for?
So about $4 million.
$4 million. And what was the time frame from snowy Wisconsin packing pallets?
About 2.5 years.
2.5 years.
So at that point, we were probably packing those pallets. We were really only 6 months into the business. And then, we hit $1 million that first year. And then we kind of just kept scaling and scaling and scaling up.
So you go from crippled and bankrupt and depressed to, buying a digital product, going through problems. And this is where it's just a testament to you can figure it out. You just figured it out. It had to be done and you got it done.
Yep.
And getting over that hurdle, then 2 years later, you have a $4 million exit.
Yep.
Which, safe to say, that was more money than you had ever seen in your life?
Yeah, I grew up pretty poor and pretty, we didn't have food a lot of times. So it was definitely, it was one of, I think the best moment I can explain it is, selling a business is almost like getting rid of a kid. I mean, if you've ever sold a business. And so it was really stressful. And there was a lot of back and forth with, people and just, banks and, when you sell a business, all your papers, they what happened 2 years ago this date with everything has to be T's crossed, I's dotted. So it's it finally, I remember me and my wife, we had taken the kids to school that day. And at this time they were 4 and 5. So I think preschool and kindergarten, or maybe they're kindergarten and first grade, somewhere in there. And, you hand over all the access, all the information in the escrow company, and they are okay, they send you the confirmation back that the wire's on its way. And every 5 seconds, I'm checking my bank account. Is it there? Is it there? Is it there? And me and my wife are I'm getting stressed out now because it's 3:30 because we're picking up our kids from school. I'm come on. Right before my kids get out of school to pick them up, me and my wife are sitting in her Jeep. I check my bank account. I see all those zeros lined up across the board. And I look at my wife because she was a huge proponent in building the business, supporting me. Just so you know, I wanted to go back to work so many times after my back surgery. My wife refused to let me go to work because she knew that I'd be completely miserable.
Wow, that's a good woman.
And she said, no, this is what you've dreamed for. I will keep us afloat while you do this. And there was a lot of ups and downs in the process. We looked at each other like this, gazed into each other's eyes, and we just started bawling. We just started crying. And then the bell for the school, the kids to get out rings, and we're okay, we gotta go get the kids.
Put it together.
Put it together. And
And you walk into school a millionaire.
Yeah.
A multimillionaire.
And we walked out to pick up like the kids, and the kids are like, "What's wrong, Mom and Dad? What happened?" And it was like,
"We're multimillionaires."
I'm like, I mean, they were like 4 and 5, so I guess we didn't really. I'm like, we're just really happy. We always called it Puppy Logo Company because my kids worked in the business and everything else, and so I'm like, we finally sold the business, and we just kind of told them, like they're like, "Oh, okay, cool." That was it. Like, to them, it was like, okay, another day.
Jeez, this is the best story ever, Jerry. And you do some coaching inside of the 1%. I have to ask, when a student brings you an excuse about why they can't do it, you must want to crush them because you've had every excuse to quit or give up and you still did it. I'm being extreme, right? Like everybody has their own story, but what goes through your head when you're working with somebody and they have an excuse, knowing everything that you've overcome?
It's not as extreme as you would think. I actually have more empathy for them because like dealing with a lot of my own mental stuff and like leading up to building the business and even during the business, I think the hardest thing for me was just doing what I knew I needed to do, like, and allowing myself to do that. Like it's really easy to tell someone, "Hey, go ABC," but if in their brain they're so afraid of success, and that's really what most people are, is they're actually afraid of success. I think I was afraid of success, like, and having money. I don't know why. I haven't ever figured it out. But I think there's so many times that people know what they need to do. They just won't do it for one reason or another. And so I don't get angry or like, "I've been through all this stuff much worse than you. You got it so..." I don't go into it with that mentality. I go in and I go, like, okay, what's the real issue here? Why aren't you doing what you know you need to do? And usually it involves, like, especially with like people I coach one-on-one and dive in, it's usually just diving in to see what is actually happening in their brain that's preventing them from doing what they need to do. And it could be, every person is different. It could be a million different things. They could be afraid of success. Some people, I don't know, they just have like some trauma from when they were little that they had to get through to be able to allow themselves to do what they need to do. So I don't think my story makes me like pompous about it, because I know that it's not about necessarily what you go through. It's just allowing yourself to do what you know you need to do, which I think is what every entrepreneur struggles with.
What do you usually do to walk somebody through that process? Because I was having a conversation with our sales team just this morning, and we were going through some of the changes we made in the 1%, like our new AI tools and some sourcing resources that we're bringing to the table. And we were talking about how the only reason why somebody would not be successful with the new curriculum and the new tools is if they didn't believe in themselves enough to do it. Because the steps are there, the tools are there, the relationships are there, the coaching is there, the mentorship is there, the resources, like it's all there in like a very logical format. Mm-hmm. It's just comes down to if somebody will believe in themselves enough to do it. And I was telling the sales team, like, when you run into that is when you really have to not let someone go. Like, you do not let someone quit on themselves just because they doubt themselves. That is the part where you can serve them the most. That is the part where you can like grab them and say, if you think I'm going to give you up and let you go because you don't believe in yourself, we got to have a deeper conversation. But getting them to do the work is a mental hurdle that needs to be overcome. So how do you coach somebody through that?
So it usually starts with a lot of questions. Like, if someone's like, usually, if I'm coaching someone one-on-one and I tell them to do certain things and it doesn't happen once, it's like, okay, maybe there was something happened that week or, whatever. It's usually when I start seeing a pattern of like, I've had one-on-one clients where they'll reschedule over and over again because they haven't got their stuff done that they knew they were supposed to get done. Or, they'll come up with something, I am sick or I'm this. And so I'll give people a break, because I know the hardest, the only person you're battling as an entrepreneur is yourself. Yep. Like that's the biggest battle in the world, is just battling yourself over anything else. Something
a mentor told me once was, you've got to let go of this idea of everybody's trying to get you. Everyone's trying to help you. The only person battling you is you. Like, when you're an entrepreneur and you have a vision and you're moving towards it, it's kind of amazing how many people are willing to support you if you let them. So I'm totally vibing with what you're saying. So they're coming up with excuses, not showing up, canceling. You're looking for a pattern. And what do you extrapolate from that pattern?
So after, they've shown like a few times of like where they won't follow through or they're doing stuff, it's usually a really personal one-on-one conversation of like just diving in of like what they actually want a lot of times and asking them why they didn't get it done repeatedly. And you have to almost get someone to admit that they are their own problem. Like if you can get somebody to admit and recognize that they are the problem, that it's not the external circumstances problem, that it's their problem, that's usually when they go, the light bulb clicks and they're like, I am the problem.
There's no one left to blame.
Exactly. They have to take responsibility for their actions.
There's no more outside person or circumstance or reason that you can point the finger to anymore. And I think that is so empowering that when that person says, I'm the problem, so I can be the solution too.
And it's usually what happens is once they finally like, and it's not, a lot of times it's not like a light bulb moment. Sometimes it is. I had people go like, I'm the problem. And I'm like, and they're like, and you just give them like not an awkward pause, but a silence for a second. And I've had people break down and cry on the call. And I'm like, that's not what I try to get people to do, but they need that release of like, I am the problem. You are the only one responsible. One of the things I learned early on is like, no one is coming to save me. No one's coming to save you. No one's coming to save whoever's watching this. The only person who can save you is you. Like you are the only one. And until you take 100% responsibility for your life, nothing will change at all. That's plain and simple.
And it doesn't matter how you got here. It doesn't matter what the road that you took to get here. It just matters if do you take responsibility for it now.
Yeah.
And make changes now.
Yeah. And so that's usually the start of it. And that's usually when I see people kind of go like, get the realization, like I'm the problem. Okay. I got to work through whatever I'm working through. And it really just depends on what their whole issue is. Like there's a million different variables, but it's really just getting them to realize that they are the problem. They need to be the only one who's going to make the decision. Like, I'm not going to force you to do stuff. You need to force yourself to do stuff because you are the only one responsible for your outcome. I'm not responsible for your outcome. I can give you every tool in the world, but if you don't take the tools and like use them, it isn't going to matter. You are the only one who can handle that responsibility, and you are the only one responsible for what happens. Like, I have a really hard time even like taking responsibility for my own success because that's one of my own weaknesses. Like, because I'm always like, oh, Ryan taught me this, Ryan taught me that. And everyone's like, you have a really like crazy story. You went through some shit. And I always just like, I did what was necessary. That's like, everyone is like, people like in the 1% love my story. People, anyone who's, followed my story or knows me or read my book, everyone's like, you inspire me. I'm like, I don't feel that way.
I understand that. I completely get what you're saying. It's just like the reality of the situation. Like I'm hearing you say like, you don't glamorize it. It's just that's what you had to do. And I don't glamorize my stories either. I've learned that if I tell them in a certain way, it connects with people. But I don't think of my own successes or my own stories as particularly interesting. It's just what happened. And that's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, one of the hardest things that I still struggle with to this day is I don't see myself how other people see me. Like everyone looks at me as like, they look up to me or they, my story or this. And I'm like, I'm just a normal dude who did some cool stuff.
You know what I have found to be helpful, because you're kind of flirting with this idea of imposter syndrome. Like other people see you this way and you don't see yourself. And something that has helped me with that is simply being happy that they're having that insight and realizing that like I have my own logical story, they have theirs, and something about their perception about me is having an impact in their story. And I'm just happy for them. So I don't view it as like this means anything about me. I might take feedback if somebody says, you're really good at this, or this really helped. Oh, thank you for that. I can put that in the repository. But I just say, like, I'm really glad you're having that insight. I'm really glad for you. I'm really glad your story led you to this. And that has liberated me from imposter syndrome, because I'm just doing what I have to do or what I want to do. And if someone receives that in a way that's helpful for them, it really says something about them and the path they took to get there. That's it.
It's a big flip on like how I see it, because I think I never want to be like, the person people look up to. So changing the script from it's about me to it's about them. Yeah, that really...
It dissolves the imposterness of it for me anyway. You mentioned that you wrote a book. Great freaking book, by the way.
Thank you.
It's called I'll Be Happy When. Would you give a summary of this?
So it kind of starts out with, because we didn't go into like after the sale much. So it kind of starts out with a little bit of my life story, like a little bit of my upbringing. I honestly, 90% of the bad stuff of my upbringing I left out because I didn't want it to be a super negative book. But I kind of tells the story I kind of told. And then it gets to the point when I sell the company. And I think like I'm going to retire. I'm going to be just so happy. Like I went out to Utah and I got the nice house and I got the side-by-sides and the dirt bikes and the toys and the whatever. And after about the first 6 months of like just playing every day, I was miserable. Like I was depressed. I don't really talk about it too much because everyone's like, poor you, rich guy, has every toy in the world. But honestly, like money doesn't necessarily make you happy. I always tell people money's a lubricant for life. If you're a happy person, and money gives you options to do more things that make you happy or experiences. But I had this picture in my head of how I was going to be so happy just because I had money.
Just because your biggest problem went away.
Because this biggest problem that I thought was the end all be all of my entire life would go away, that I would just be happy. And that was so wrong. Yeah. So wrong. Yeah. And so it kind of goes through the rest of my journey of kind of how I figured out me. Like I'm about 4 years from my exit, how the last 4 years, and I wrote it about a couple years ago, or I published a couple years ago. So it kind of like the first year after my exit, it kind of goes through some of the things I did to just find myself. In all reality, these last 4 years, I've just spent finding myself and figuring out what makes me happy and, starting other businesses. And, I thought I would retire and just lay on a beach all day and I'd be happy. But I like purpose. I'm driven. I like helping people. I like doing things. And so what I had to realize is that was a stepping stone. It wasn't the end of the road. And the reason the book's called I'll Be Happy When is because my whole life, I put off my enjoyment of everything. I put off my enjoyment of a lot of time with my family, my kids. I did include them a lot, but anything that I wanted to do, I kind of left myself out. And I didn't make time for friends. I didn't make time for anything. I was just like, I'll be happy when this happens. And then, and it started when I was young. Like, well, if I only had a car, I'll be happy when I have a car. Because, man, I'm going to go get so many girls. We're going to go around. And then I got the car. I'm like, man, chicks still don't like me. That's a problem. No,
it's always the next event away from having joy, from having fulfillment. So what'd you do different when you realized that the $4 million didn't make you happy, which is actually in some ways harder than when you're not happy without money, because the hope that money will solve that is kind of a guiding light. But once you get it and you're still not happy, A, you don't know where else to hang your hope, and B, there's nobody you can talk to about it. We did a podcast with Adam Hendel, founded Ballsy, had a $15 million exit after like 2 or 3 years. And he said, I never struggled with anxiety until I had my exit. And I said, funny you say that, me neither. Because who do you talk to about that? It's such like,
I should have called you, but it was like, or anybody like who's done it. But I think I felt piece of that matcha just got stuck in my throat. I felt so ashamed. I literally felt ashamed. And I think it was because I was in this position that, I didn't have to work. I didn't have to do anything. I had done very well even building up to the sale of the company. I felt ashamed. Like I have no one, like no one's going to have, oh, poor Jared,
There's
moves
no
across.
more Albanians rushing to your house to help you, right? Because like nobody's like on your team anymore. You won.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you going to do for me now? Is at least the perception. I don't know if that's an accurate perception, but that's what we believe when we're newly rich.
I was like, no one's going to feel like,
Yeah.
no one's going to, I had no one like, so people only communicate well when they can understand like the problem, or they can, they can go. I had no one that I wanted to reach out. I guess I could have reached out to you. There's several people I knew, but I felt ashamed. I was like, I have to be the only one who feels like this. Like, I made all this money. I should just be happy. Like I thought, like I kept saying, like, I'll be happy when I retire and I make all this money and all this stuff. And when I retired, I'm 38 right now. I was 34 years old when I retired. How many people have sympathy for me right now? So and how I kind of got through that, it was just kind of a lot of like, I really kind of went back to like the working on me of like, what actually makes me happy? Like, what do I like to do? What makes me happy? And it really came down to, I liked helping people. So like I started helping a few of my friends that had businesses, and I started, turning their businesses around and helping them out. And I started like helping other people. And like I wrote my book, and I started doing consulting, and it
started being about other people.
That's exactly what it was. It was no longer about me being the beneficiary. It was about helping other people get what they wanted.
Man, that's so true. It took me so long to figure that out.
Took me a while too.
and I forget a lot. I still forget. Like I would tell you, I can never catch this in the moment, but on the days when I feel depressed, it's because I'm thinking about myself. The minute that I flip it to somebody else,
yep,
I changes my whole day. And that is a lesson that has taken me a while to learn, and now it's just intellectual and practiced, but I hope that it's embodied one day.
Yeah, I
hope I can wake up and just care about other people all the time. I hope, because I'll be happier if I can do it. I'll be happy when I care about other people.
Yeah. I think the big thing out of it, like that I learned, is that there's no finish line. The only finish line in life is death. And I don't know how many people are really wanting to get that finish line much sooner than they feel they should, or like whatever. So I think I had to realize, like, there's no moment, there's no point, there's no time there's no arrival that I'm going to either be happy or fulfilled. What I realized is there's only moments. Life comes down to moments that we have. If you really think back, your memories, they're nothing but snippets of moments. They're moments of when your kids were born or a special event. You don't remember the full, like my kids are 10 and 11. I don't remember the full spectrum of their lives. I only remember small moments. And so what I try to do now that really brings me a lot of joy is create those moments of being completely present, doing the things I love with the people I love. Like, we were joking around before this. I've known of Ryan like 8 years. It's the first time we've met is last night when we hung out. Me and Jason, who's over here, hung out. And the reason is because the reason I do it now, where I kind of avoided a lot of these situations before, because I realized those are the moments that matter. So it was like, I really need to, and that's another thing, is I learned that the only thing in life is relationships, and in those moments, and spending time with the people that make you feel good.
Yeah.
And so instead of before, I would have said, I'm not going to go to that. I'm not going to do that. Second, you reached out and said, hey, you want to come to Austin and record a podcast with me? And then we'll do a bunch of new content for the 1%. And I was like, instantly, yes. And I was like, because this moment is going to be a moment that I will remember in 40 years of meeting you, of giving you a big hug, of, just that moment will mean everything to me. And that is more than any money, anything else. It's the small moments that everyone doesn't pause to really pay attention to. Is what life's about.
You're not allowed to make me cry on my own podcast. That's against the rules, but thank you. There is something you're touching on that I'm genuinely curious about, and it's that you are one of those unique entrepreneurs that at least now, I don't know if it was always this way, but at least now seems to be able to balance lifestyle and big thinking. Yeah. So you ride dirt bikes all the time, right?
Dirt bikes, side by sides, Jeeps.
You're with your kids all the time, and you guys homeschool, right?
Mm-hmm. Homeschool our boys,
and because you want to, and you live in the part of the country that you want to. It's not near a big airport, and you have this. You seem to have a rich life, at least now, but you also think really big. And most of the people that I know, or the entrepreneurs that are sort of popularized, are either all work or all play. You're either a lifestyle business entrepreneur or you play a really big game. You seem to thread this needle in a delicate way that I don't see many people do. How do you think about that?
Well, I think there's different portions of my life. It's really hard to kind of like explain it. Like, work makes me happy. I don't think like, I did a time where I wasn't always like this. I'll jump back. Building my business, I was like grind, 18, 20 hours a day. I did always, one of the biggest things that I always pride myself of is my kids have never seen me go to work ever. That they've never seen me go to work. They've seen me on business trip stuff, but not like go to a 9 to 5. And I've chaperoned every field trip my kids have had. We just started homeschooling this year. Otherwise, they're 10 and 11 now. Every field trip up to that point, I was a chaperone on. So I made time for that. I always made time for my wife. We go out on date nights, my kids, but everything else kind of got left at the side. I just grind. What I realized is that when I grind and I'm behind a laptop or a computer, and I've heard you say this before, I am the least effective person in the world. I get depressed.
Yep.
And so I think really it's a balance of, I know what makes me happy. I don't think like I purposely, like I do prioritize my lifestyle. Like I'm on vacation a lot. I spend a lot of time with my kids. Doing what I want is my priority in life. But I also love working on big ideas, big things, being productive, helping people out. And so I don't think I actually like mentally pre-planned anything. It's just like, this is what makes me happy. My work makes me happy. My family makes me happy. I'm going to make time for both of them equally. And it just looks like I'm some master planner. When in all reality, it's just dumb luck of knowing what makes me happy.
Here's how I'm processing this. You wrote a book called I'll Be Happy When. You figured out that it's about moments. It's about energy management. And it's about giving to other people. And the more that you can lean into those three things, the better life works. And the life works is defined by you're sharper, you're clearer, you're happier, you're in shape. And all those things become they all feed each other. Whereas I think a lot of the perception in entrepreneurship is that you've got to rob from one to have time for the other. And I don't know that that's a lesson that you can learn other than going through it, which often looks like grinding your face off until you have a win and then recalibrating somehow. And whether that is, it requires an absolute grind to get there or you just don't know any better, I'm not sure. But that's kind of the trend that I've seen is you get to the mountaintop and you realize it's not the right mountain and you've got to climb a different mountain and sort of recalibrate around fulfillment.
Yeah.
And then in my experience, once you start doing that, business starts working too.
Yeah. I mean, I think what most people lack is realizing what makes them happy. Because and you've said this before as well, when I'm happier, I make more money.
Yep.
And so I think most people don't take the time to realize what makes themselves click. They just read a book that says, oh, you got to get up at 5 a.m. and do this and hustle and whatever, and you'll be rich. Or, oh, if you want to be happy, you got to do X, Y, Z. Most people don't take the internal time, which I take a lot of, like, I don't work that much anymore. I mean, I set a few hours aside per day. I don't work Fridays. Most of the time I don't work Thursdays. I take those to like specifically go with my kids. But I realize what works for me is spending a limited amount of time in front of my computer, only doing the things. A lot of times it's coaching calls for either, the 1% or personal one-on-one clients. And that's really the only time I spend in front of the screen or managing, you know, some businesses, stuff like that. But it's a limited time. And the rest I spend doing things that I enjoy, and I make way more money because I'm not just sitting behind a screen, because I have the self-awareness to go, this is what makes me happy. And just so you know, I'm now to the point where even if I was broke, I would rather be happy and have a slower rise than just grind it out and be miserable. Because the pleasure is in the building. It's not in the end result. And if I...
Well, it is for 6 months, and then you get depressed again.
True. But I think so many people think the joy comes from the end of things. And now there's even neuroscience and stuff that are proving that the joy is actually in the process. So the joy is in the building. So why do so many of us make it so miserable to build a business, to build a life that we want, to do whatever? They make it a miserable experience on themselves. But you'll look back, like I look back, I don't remember that as that miserable. But if I really go back mentally,
it was miserable.
It was miserable. And so I think that's what you need to do, is figure out what makes you tick and you happy. And everything else just seems to work easier.
Life works better. My last question for you is, if you were in the hospital right after your back surgery and you hallucinated and Jared today showed up and you gave advice to the guy in the hospital bed, what would you tell him?
Honestly, I think I would tell myself to stop worrying. Everything will be okay, and enjoy life just a little bit, because it's a short experience that we have here. I recently lost my dad and realized that life can end abruptly. And I think I would just remind myself that the shortness of life, we should probably actually enjoy it. So if you're watching this and you hate your job and you want to do something else, make that change. You know, if you were miserable in your business, figure out how to make it fun again. Because really, that's joy in enjoying life is the only thing that... Living life. Most few of us don't live life. Living life, I think, is the only thing that matters, and having a good experience.
Jared, good to see you, my man. Thanks for coming to Texas.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Jared and I met the day that we did this podcast interview, and he said, I don't go to events. I don't go to networking events. I don't go to masterminds. I like my life riding dirt bikes with my kids. But I wanted to be here for this because I want to contribute to the community that invested so much in me on my climb to running a multi-million-dollar business. Jared also agreed to be one of our contributors and our mentors inside the new curriculum for the 1%. We brought in 18 experts in every step of the journey to go from 0 to 100 sales a day. Everything from advertising and sourcing and packaging and building a following and launching and selling a bunch on Amazon and getting reviews. Every step of the journey is covered by someone who has used a piece of that strategy to be successful scaling a multi-million-dollar business. And Jared is just one of them. Yet we have hundreds of success stories like Jared's of people who started from nothing and built successful 7-figure businesses. And if you want to be next in line, go over to capitalism.com/1, fill out the form, and we'll get you on your road to 1 million. I'm Ryan Daniel Moran with capitalism.com. Thanks for watching. See you next time.